Hey everybody, this is Khara Crosswhite Brindle again with another video. I have my good friend and colleague Ashley with us. Hi Ashley.
Hey.
We are doing another video, all things focused on new grads. So the question to ask all of you is, have you heard about supervisory billing? Have you had it broken down? If not, this video is for you. Ashley, let's start with the defining of supervisory billing for folks watching this video. How would you define it?
So, supervisory billing refers to the process of billing for services provided by a supervisee under the supervision of a licensed mental health therapist. So, what this can look like is an LPC or an LCSW or an LMFT owns a group practice. That group practice employs pre-licensed therapists. So a social work candidate, an LPCC, and MFTC in Colorado, or even interns. And those pre-licensed therapists or interns can see clients who want to use their insurance. But the service is actually billed under the licensed therapist's name and information. So in other words, the licensed therapist assumes responsibility for those services provided and bills for those services on behalf of the supervisee.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are like having a mind moment right now, I just want to validate that because when I first learned what this looked like, I was like, wait a minute. So what Ashley is describing is like the pre-licensed or candidate or person hired by the group practice who's not yet licensed themselves does not exist to the insurance in this capacity. Like they are behind the scenes, they're providing a quality service to the client, but they have no liability when it comes to their documentation in the sense of that what's billed, right? So the service, the claim is in the licensed person's name. Obviously, the person who provided the service is writing the note because you were the one rendering the service. But for anyone like me who's like, this doesn't track in like the fullest ethical possibility, I'm with you. Like this feels a little funky, which is why I actually wanted to create this video to demystify some of the things around supervisory billing and the pros, the cons, the risks, so that you can make an informed choice if this is a position you want to go into as a new grad. So that's the definition of it. What's the next piece that people need to be thinking about, Ashley?
So I think just to back up a little, over the last couple years, and maybe you can speak to this too, but anecdotally, we've seen a huge increase in these types of practices. So perhaps the private practice owner has a wait list or a demand for their specialty, and that private practice owner brings in someone else to join their group and uses supervisory billing. A lot of small groups and mid-sized groups that I know of operate based on this model. What are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's become more of a shift, I think, probably post-pandemic than pre-pandemic, because we saw a shift from contractors to employee models here in Colorado in the pandemic. Makes sense. A lot more like control and oversight of the quality of care. And so supervisory billing might fit under that with a licensed person taking on that responsibility. But yeah, I think it also just addresses the mental health crisis and the demand. So like no judgment for folks who want to do this. I think it's just about making sure the people coming in and know exactly what this means and what it looks like, which is why we're talking about it.
Yeah,
So,
so as a summary, supervisory billing is typically used in situations where the supervisee is not yet licensed and is still working towards licensure.
mhm,
Certain insurance companies have this process in place or ask that you submit your own documentation of your supervisory process for approval, or
okay.
they ask for an attestation form that you are providing supervision to the supervisee who is providing services to the clients. The criteria for supervision can vary by setting, vary by payer source or insurance company. It can vary by state even. So just some general issues to think about too.
Yeah, so I think for folks that are taking us on or considering this, a big piece of that is, in my experience, the two qualifiers are quality supervision and regular supervision. And then most payers aren't dictating what that actually looks like. So they're either defaulting to our licensing board, makes sense because that's who's actually like overseeing us in that way, or they're just saying go with what is already being done in the community. So, however you define quality supervision and however you define regular supervision might also vary per group practice that you're talking to about this opportunity. Would you agree, Ashley?
I would agree. I think one of the pieces that I've seen is pretty common throughout is a supervisor has to sign off on notes or documentation in order for insurance to reimburse the
Mhm.
agency for the service being provided. And
Right.
so, who's the supervisor? One, who's the supervisor signing off on documentation? Two, and what type of supervision are you getting? And is that
Mhm.
on site as part of being employed by this agency, or is it off site in some sort of capacity?
Right. So like contracted out. So we're looking at kind of a distinction between clinical supervision, supervisory billing, excuse me, and administrative supervision of like who's doing paperwork, who's making sure you're compliant. And so
Yes.
that is a great question for folks watching this video to ask is like, how many people am I reporting to and for what reason? Is it a one-stop shop where I have one supervisor who's doing all those things? Or is it I have two or three, depending on the roles that they have? And does that change the expectations of how often I'm doing supervision and how long each of those supervision meetings are?
I
For
think,
sure.
simply put, asking questions like, who am I billing under? Who does the billing? What is the supervision requirement? Who provides me supervision? And who reviews my notes? Um, and along with that, you might get different answers from different agencies. And
Right.
so, someone who's looking to join a group that does supervisory billing, how can you be prepared to ask these types of questions and engage in a conversation about, okay, what does my actual day to day look like in terms of direct services with clients, but also administrative requirements such as notes, and then the supervisory requirement?
Mhm. Yeah. So ask questions. That's the takeaway from this video is ask all the questions you need to ask to make that informed choice of is this a fit for me? Does this feel like it's in congruence with your values, what you're hoping for as a candidate moving towards licensure, right? Like we recognized, Ashley and I both recognize as approved clinical supervisors that supervision is a big part of your development, of your growth as a professional. And so these questions might then lead to some clarity around the quality of supervision and that regularity of supervision that we talked about earlier. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or questions for folks watching this video who might be taking on this opportunity?
One other question I want to hit on, and I know it can be uncomfortable, but are you, as the pre licensed therapist, the one talking to the client about money and about insurance coverage? And some practices have a whole billing department or a billing person who does that. And it takes away that conversation and the pressure that we have to have with that client.
Mm-hmm.
Some practices require that we are the ones that have the conversation with the client. And so, how are you getting information about what insurance coverage they have? What is their copay? Do you know what a copay is? What is their deductible? Do you know what a deductible is? So I think it's important to highlight there's a ton of insurance lingo out there
Mm-hmm.
that has a very steep learning curve. And so remembering when we take insurance, there's all sorts of nuts and bolts to learn. And the supervisory piece is just one of them.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned this because I just put a blog out recently about this. So I'll make sure to link it below of like its insurance terms for you and clients to better understand what we're talking about when we want to use our insurance for mental health services. So um, you and I are on the same page that way. I think the other thing to think about is for these pre-licensed folks, that conversation is one thing, but I think also like what questions do need to be relayed to the supervisory biller? What questions can they answer themselves? And then it makes me think of our previous video on the disclosure statement of like, is the supervisory biller identified in that disclosure statement? Because they are one of the supervisors, potentially. We're saying it could be two or three. So I guess what are your thoughts on that, Ashley? Do you think they should be listed there as well?
I think so, because sometimes clients get an explanation of benefits or an EOB from their insurance company, and the service provided and the rendering provider is going to be listed on that. And
Yeah.
so, if you're the pre licensed therapist, your name might not be anywhere on some documentation that the client receives. And so, being able to have that conversation up front of, yes, you are seeing me for this service. And here's how I work with my agency. Here's how I work with my supervisor. Here are things that could come up, and how can we have an open dialogue about what billing looks like for you?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it allows more clients to be seen. We are trying to break down barriers in care with a model like this. And we also want our recent grads or interns or pre-licensed folks to be set up for success in this sort of private practice or group practice setting.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate you saying like on that explanation of benefits, it's going to have someone else's name. And what if the client freaks out and goes, that's not my provider, and makes a call to their insurance, who's then like, wait a minute, what's happening here? So it can lead to all sorts of confusion. Worst case, it looks like insurance fraud, which is not something any of us want to have to deal with. So, as we're talking, I'm actually thinking about the purpose of having a standalone document that outlines this practice does supervisory billing, and this is what it means. Here's the supervisors that are responsible for that service. The supervisor assigned to your rendering provider is X, blah, 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 right? So like I could see that being a really transparent document that would help clients understand the process and then give consent to that particular setup. I think that's their right to know, but maybe that's just me. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a great idea. It is their right to know. In our disclosure statement, clients have the right to make an informed choice and who's doing their billing, how much am I being charged, and what services are covered. Those are all things that help clients make informed choices about their care. And I think it is a jumping off point for education too. A lot of times we go into medical offices or dentist offices and we're just given a piece of paper and like, okay, here's what you owe. And a lot of us don't even know what that means. And so if we can be someone who can educate our clients at least a little bit, and open the door for them to have more information about how medical or mental health or dental practices do billing, then maybe they'll have some more empowerment to ask questions in other settings too. And so also recognizing this is a way, one, for transparency, but two, to practice skills we're trying to help these clients build and have them transfer those into other settings so that they can be their best advocate.
Love that. Yeah. So it's helping the clients. For anyone who's watching this that's a group practice owner, maybe the takeaway for you is that you're creating a document separate or more distinct from the disclosure statement of this is how we do things here in this practice. What questions does the client have? And then for folks that are considering a position like this, as Ashley already named, this is a way of meeting the need. So we're absolutely in support of it. I think we can both speak to. We just want it to be done with a lot of transparency, very clear, a lot of things in writing, preferably. And the good news is the colleagues that we know are doing that, right? They have those attestation documents. They have the policy and procedures in place. So please don't be scared off by this video in that way. We just want you to know all the working pieces of it. Any final thoughts, Ashley, for this video?
I think we hit a lot of information. I don't think I have any more final thoughts. What about you?
Sounds good. I would say anyone who's watching this video, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because obviously this is still kind of a gray area. Colorado is currently navigating it. Other states might be navigating it differently. So if you have thoughts for us on this, we'd be happy to hear from you in the comments below this video. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.